So this happened to a friend of mine this past summer. I'm sorry it's not a personal story, and I'm glad this isn't my personal story. It is a bit long, so I wanted to share it as a cautionary tale. About 20 students, myself included, from my university, did a study abroad program in France last summer. We were spending a week in Paris before going to the town where the university was located. Most of the group got a group flight deal to Paris through the university. Others flew separately. The only requirement was that we had to be in Paris by the day we had to leave to go to our university. Most of us had arrived by the third day into our Paris trip, except for my friend Amanda. Naturally, we were all worried about her because her phone wasn't working. She had to update us from Facebook whenever she could get free Wi-Fi, which wasn't very often. Her flight had been delayed by about 6 times already. Another day passed and still nothing from Amanda. We're all freaking out at this point. Since her phone isn't working, we couldn't even contact her. The 5th day rolls around and still nothing. We all had a scheduled bike tour of the city that morning and a boat ride on the river that afternoon, so we didn't return to the hotel until about 7 p.m. that evening. When I got in, Amanda was asleep in her room. We were assigned roommates. Of course, I woke her up and asked her where the hell she'd been. She told me that when she finally got to the airport, she was exhausted and broke. She had multiple layovers and had basically spent all her on-hand cash on food, plus her bank card wasn't working. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Charles de Gaulle Airport, it's massive. Unless you have a map or understand French completely, you will get lost. So she gets there, lost, broke, tired, hungry, and carrying 3 big-ass bags sitting inside the terminal. She said this good-looking guy walked up to her and started talking to her in perfect English. "You look tired. Do you need a taxi to your hotel?" Red flag number 1. What taxi driver gets out of his cab and walks into the airport to find a rider? Not thinking, she says, "Yes, thank you so much, I'm exhausted." He smiles at her and grabs one of her heavier bags and tells her to follow him. She does, and he leads her to this elevator. Red flag number 2. She was already on street level from where all the taxis depart. She gets inside, and he hits the button for the basement level. He gets on the phone before the elevator opens and starts speaking in French, which she couldn't really understand because it was slang. She starts freaking out though when the door opens. It was a service deck, meant for employees of the airport or something, not for passenger parking or taxi pickup. It was damp and dark, and as she said, something literally out of a horror movie. The guy gets out of the elevator first and turns to her smiling. "Allons-y," which I think means "let's go." She takes a few steps and sees, in the far corner of the deck, the trunk of this green, unmarked van with no license plate, open, and a huge, ugly-ass Middle Eastern guy steps out of the driver's seat. At this point, she realizes she's in trouble, but she doesn't want to alert the smiling guy because she's about to get the fuck out of there. There's no one in sight, so screaming would be useless, but the lift door is still open. She quickly placed one of her bags in the middle of the lift entrance and told the smiling guy that she needed her wallet that was in the bag that he was carrying. He looks at her sternly for a minute, but walks over to her and hands her the bag. She told me she pushed him down onto the ground with the weight of the bag and got back in the elevator as fast as she could. He got up and was bounding after her. She said, "Girl, I hit every goddamn button on that elevator panel." The doors closed as soon as he reached her, and she could hear him banging on them as she was going back up to street level. She got to the taxi pickup lane and started bawling. A police officer approached her. She told him what happened, and he drove her to the hotel. On the way, he told her that the men were likely linked to a sex trafficking ring and were approaching young women inside the airport who had tags on their luggage, indicating that they had come from the US, assuming that American women were more trusting. To summarize, my friend almost got abducted by creepers in Charles de Gaulle Airport in the parking deck, and Taken is absolutely real life. Coming back from Prague to Kiev, I found myself in part of the airport that didn't require passing through security. This area is always bustling with folks waiting for arriving passengers, a few currency exchange counters, and people like me trying to sort out their ride home. I just wanted to use my phone to book a ride to my apartment, a simple task that unexpectedly turned my airport experience into a very chilling encounter. As I sat, I casually glanced at a nearby currency exchange to check the ongoing rates. That's when a man, supposedly working for the currency exchange, noticed me. He approached with a hustle, speaking English, which caught me off guard. "You need hryvnia? I can give you very good deal. Come here, he urged eagerly. His insistence felt very off, so I chose to ignore him, hoping he'd take the hint and leave me alone. But instead of backing off, he followed me as I tried to get up and leave. "What language do you speak?" he persisted, trying to engage me in any way possible. His demeanor was becoming increasingly intrusive and aggressive, and all I could do was shoot him a dirty look and hoping he'd back off. But he didn't. Instead, he seemed to be even more agitated by my lack of attention. Suddenly, another man yelled at him. Up until that moment, I hadn't noticed this other guy, but he had been observing the whole interaction very closely. Their exchange quickly escalated, and although my grasp of Ukrainian and Russian is shaky at best, the tone was unmistakable. They were arguing about me. The currency exchange guy shouted something to the effect of, "I have her," which sent a cold shiver down my spine. Realizing that the situation was getting dangerous, I tried to walk away swiftly. That's when he made his move, grabbing the strap of my backpack and trying to pull me towards him as he commanded, "Come." Panic surged through me, but thankfully, my self-defense training kicked in. I spun around, breaking his grip with a swift motion, raising my arms defensively, and yelled in the clearest Ukrainian I could muster, No money, stop." His face twisted in anger at my resistance, prompting me to escalate my response. "Help! Get lost! Leave me alone! Help!" My shouts drew the attention of several bystanders, their eyes suddenly on us. Realizing the gravity of the situation, and feeling a gaze of the crowd, and perhaps realizing he was losing control, he backed off, and then disappeared into the crowd as quickly as he had appeared. In the aftermath, as my heart still pounded on my chest, I couldn't shake the feeling that this man was involved in something sinister. Theft is one thing, but his determination to get me to go with him, to grab me so boldly, it spoke of an organized crime, a terrifying reality that I had narrowly escaped. I stayed in the airport for a while longer, shaken and watching over my shoulder until my ride came. This incident left me wary, a reminder of how quickly a simple act like booking a ride can turn into a potential life-threatening situation in the blink of an eye. It was a stark lesson in staying alert, trusting my instincts, and the importance of knowing how to defend myself. I have to preface this story by saying I was a really smart kid when I was little. At just 18 months old, I knew every word to The Bare Necessities from the Jungle Book and would perform it for my mom's co-workers. I don't think anyone ever taught me what to do in a situation with a stranger though, just not to talk to them. I also have to say that when I was little, around 3 or 4, my mom let me cut my hair really short, like a boy's, and everyone mistook me for one because I refused to wear anything girly. Also, like most small children, I wasn't a good listener. For some reason, my grandma took me to the airport with her one day when she was watching me. I can't remember if my parents had gone out of town or if we were picking up someone else, and she had to bring me because it was her day to watch me while my parents were at work. Regardless, this was before security in the airports was super tight, so we were headed to a gate to pick whoever it was up. Or maybe we were just out in the main airport and it seemed like we were headed to a gate because I was so much smaller, so everything seemed bigger. Forgive the lack of memory, I was little. I do distinctly remember, however, that my grandma scolded me for running ahead of her and told me not to do it again. 5 minutes later, I'm at it again. I ran down a small flight of stairs, maybe 3 or 4 steps at most, and was suddenly swooped up by a very large man. I remember that he smelled funny, and that he had a really scraggly beard and blonde hair and really creepy eyes. He then starts to rush off with me, and I remember being very calm about the whole thing, because in my mind, my grandma was right there, and she wouldn't let anyone hurt me. Well, she came chasing after this guy, faster than I've ever seen her move, and she's yelling at him to put me down and whacking at him with her purse. And he said to her, "Lady, chill, this is my son. The kid you're looking for must have ran off." That's when little old me pipes up and says, "I am not a boy, and you are not my daddy. Now put me down." The guy looked shocked and out of his mind, and slightly repulsed, and promptly put me down and ran off. Now, my whole family has talked this story to death. Is it possible that this guy really thought I was his son? Was he just someone who made a mistake? Or was he a pedophile who thought he was scooping up a little boy? As a whole, we lean towards the pedophile theory, mostly because of his behavior. He didn't say a word to me, just picked me up and tried to hurry off. And then when it became clear I was a girl, he hightailed it out of there as fast as he could. If he was just a man who had made a simple mistake, he probably would have stuck around and apologized to my grandmother for frightening her and for snatching me. But that didn't happen. Back in high school, I was on a robotics team that traveled for competitions in the spring. We were in Miami for a couple days, and being my first time traveling without family, my mom volunteered to chaperone. I'm a female, and so in retrospect, I understand her logic. So we all get on the bus, get to the airport, and barely get through security. I say barely because high school boys seem to think it's funny to push the TSA's buttons. Weirdos. When we landed in Miami and got settled into our hotel, my mom wasn't feeling well and needed to go to the pharmacy. Now, if you've ever been to Miami before, a word of advice: carry a map. Also, talk to the front desk at a hotel to understand the surrounding neighborhoods. My mom and I only did the first before heading to the nearby Walgreens on foot. Traffic and parking is not fun in Miami. The area our hotel was in was nice, but surrounded by some shady pockets. We walked past a nice restaurant, and maybe 2 blocks further was the Walgreens. This is where things turned sour. A block away from the pharmacy, there was the shady guy who was watching us. Maybe a minute after passing him, he started following us. If there's one thing my mom always told me, it was to be vigilant of your surrounding area. I noticed immediately when he started following. Since my mom wasn't paying attention from being ill, I started pushing her to book it to the pharmacy. The creep picked up speed as we did. I constantly looked back at him to make sure he wasn't gaining on us too much. We get to the pharmacy and we go inside, and he's still following us. At this point, I'm pulling keys out of my pocket, ready to stab and slice the f***er if he dared to come any closer. I'm very defensive when threatened, and I'm not afraid to injure someone if attacked. The guy at the register notices him and asks him if he was looking for anything in particular in the store. As soon as the creep hears him, he turns around and leaves the store. My mom and I are trying to figure out what to do once we were already there and needed to leave since more than likely he'd be waiting outside. Instead of calling the cops, I know, we should have done this. We walked outside thinking we could book it for 2 more blocks to the safer neighborhood. Sure enough, as we got outside, there he was panhandling and pestering someone else. We took that opportunity to get the hell out of there. I had my eye on him nearly constantly until we were in a much more populated and safer area of town. Until we were back in our hotel room with the door locked, I had my keys in my hands, ready to fight.